Welcome to Chai with Chopra. In today's episode, we're joined by Peter Mackay, former defense minister, East Coast icon, and the political heartthrob who's lived through helicopters, heartbreak, and headline-making moments. From jet deals to cage match jokes, we're unpacking the wild ride of one of Canada's most recognizable conservatives. Let's get into it.
Good morning, Peter Mackay with Ajay. Thank you, sir. This is supposed to be my inaugural, podcast, and I had a guest ahead of you to speak to the calamity and the situation in Manitoba. And as a proud son of Manitoba, I spoke with the chief up north, a friend of mine who I've worked with in the past, Chief David Monius, and we spoke about the wildfires. But that'll be my first episode, and thank you for coming on, taking the time with me today. We have known each other for many years, and I'm looking forward to our dialogue, brother, and to having a cup of tea with you.
Pleasure to see you, AJ. And yes, it is a somber note to start on. I'm sure Chief Monius laid out some of the very real personal impacts of these fires, which are tragic in the extreme and sadly all too common across the country. We've seen them here in Nova Scotia as well. About 2 years ago, we lost a tremendous amount of forest, people displaced. I think 17,000 people had to evacuate their homes. And so out here on the East Coast, as a sign of national unity and support, we're thinking of the people of Manitoba, people of Saskatchewan, Alberta, right across the West. I know that it's a very, very unsettling time for everyone.
The chief, I just want to quickly get this out. The chief said shame on Canada. He felt that Canada failed them. He was despondent. How would you have addressed that? Just quickly curious, as Prime Minister, what would you have done to respond to that emergency differently?
Well, look, AJ, it's a tough question, but I suspect that there were decisions made some time ago, as we saw in Alberta, and in particular, some of the preventative measures, I suppose, that could have been taken. And that's always easy after the fact to reflect on. But I know that, assistance to civil authorities when it comes to the Canadian Forces, having members of the CAF deployed quickly, efficiently, working with local firefighters and emergency responders is a key to controlling the fire and the spread of the fire. And so, any hesitation on the part of federal government can have dramatic impacts, which I think the chief is alluding to here. But these fires, they move so quickly, they jump around, they have all-consuming, disastrous impacts. And so that's not a reflection on the first responders or the military, but they have to have the authority and the deployment to get them there and to get them there quickly.
Yeah, we spoke about that, and what's really been beautiful, what's really come to bond is the First Nation to nation support. That's what he told me was heartwarming, and they came first. But anyways, I digress. Let's talk about you, sir. Welcome. You have been, sir, a political force, a national force. You were a member of parliament for many years. Your father was a politician in the Mulroney government. Please, let's just start with how you got into politics,
Sure.
Where you started. I'd like to know, please tell everyone looking, watching, listening, Minister Elmer Mackay, your father, in the Mulroney government. Please share a little bit about us and how you became a conservative, like as a young Tory, I suspect, and then maybe leading into your finding of the Conservative Party and leading that.
Well, AJ, my dad, who I'm very proud of, my father was a lawyer. He was recruited by Robert Stanfield, who was then leader of the Progressive Conservative Party, former premier of Nova Scotia. He knew my dad a bit, and he was quite instrumental in getting my father to run in a by-election in 1971. And my dad went on to serve, I think, 21 years.
Wow.
with a brief interruption when he stepped aside for Brian Mulroney to enter the House of Commons in 1983, when Mr. Mulroney became leader of the party. And
Oh, wow.
you're right to point out my
Your
father had
father
a
made
very,
the sacrifice for the. Your father made the sacrifice for the prime minister. That's very interesting. Like, wow.
yeah, and Mr. Mulroney had had roots in this part of the country. He'd gone to St. FX University. He'd attended a school in northern New Brunswick, and so Atlantic Canada was a place near and dear to his heart. And hence, years later, there is a school on the campus of St. FX dedicated to politics and history and study, and that was something that Mr. Mulroney, I know, was very, very proud of, as is his family. Caroline, in fact, I was with Mark yesterday, and so that's a real connective tissue between the Mulroneys and Atlantic Canada and our families that goes back many years. So, um, unlike what you might think or some might think, it wasn't really my father who ever pressured me or influenced me to go into politics. My mother was actually very influential in sort of my social development because she was an activist in her own right. She was involved in the women's health movement. She was very international in her outlook, coming from Ireland as a child. And in many ways, I suspect she was perhaps during my formative years much more influential in how I viewed things. But it was, to answer your question, years later, after leaving law school and I was practicing, Jean Charest was on a bit of a speaking tour here in Atlantic Canada. He was trying to rebuild the Progressive Conservative Party after they were decimated in the 90s. And so that...
Him and Elsie Wayne, right? The sole survivors.
That's right. He and Elsie Wayne. You got a good memory. And so, he sort of dropped that in my ear. Look, you should be part of this. We're trying to rebuild the party. I had not been active in politics other than helping out on my father's campaign, Mr. Mulroney's campaign, maybe provincially, but I was not, in Tory youth growing up, none of that. But I was working as a Crown attorney. I was quite switched on to the failings of the criminal justice system and areas that I thought needed attention, including the Young Offenders Act, the way we treated victims. And so I saw politics as a potential vehicle to go where the laws were made, as opposed to working within a system that felt inadequate. So I made kind of a precipitous decision in 1997 that I would seek the nomination. It was anything but certain because there were already 4 declared candidates when I entered the fray. And I managed to pull off a bit of an upset win, get the nomination. And in the 1997 election, there were a lot of political winds that were blowing, an anti-gun registration sentiment, changes that were made to various programs, including the EI system, had made folks quite upset with the Chrétien government at that time. And I managed to get elected along with sort of a young crew, André Bachand out of Quebec, a few other younger MPs. And we arrived in Ottawa. And I think it was around that time that you and I met up.
I got there on 99 as a Western desk to Martin Cochon, your friend, I guess. You were justice critic.
I was justice critic.
He was a very progressive justice minister.
Oh, he was outstanding. I learned a lot, those first years just from watching people like Martin Cochon. He and Pierre Pettigrew and others really conducted themselves in a professional way. They weren't hyper partisan. They were practical in their outlook on important issues. And I had a lot of respect then and now for them. And I frankly lament sometimes, AJ, that we don't have a little bit more collegiality in the House of Commons and the way things are conducted. And easy to say, I did my share of partisan jabbing, but I think there is less tolerance for that. And I think a lot of Canadians are feeling a bit cynical about the way the Parliament operates, and they'd like people just to get on with business and getting things done. And so we may see that from the new government. Time will tell.
So, sir, you get to Ottawa, and then you become Conservative leader, right?
Well, some years after, we had...
You essentially...
We had Mr. Charest as leader. He was pulled by a lot of circumstances and centrifugal force back to Quebec to become premier and take on the separatists. And, that left a big hole in the party. I didn't run in that first leadership opportunity. Joe Clark, you may recall, came back. He and Hugh Segal, and there were a number of other candidates. But when Mr. Clark was unsuccessful in his re-election bid to become prime minister, once again the party went looking for leadership contenders, and it was at that time I made the decision to run, and so won that contest. And we were very much in the throes of trying to rebuild the brand of the Progressive Conservative Party across the country. We had this split that you're well aware of between the Reform Party and later the Canadian
Yes.
Alliance,
Yeah.
to try to reconcile the Conservative movement. Jean Chrétien and later Paul Martin were winning almost by default. They had a 100-seat advantage by the time you hit the Manitoba border because of vote splitting throughout the country. And so really there was an impetus to try to bring the Conservative movement back together to be competitive. And while contentious at the time, we held a national referendum in both parties, and over 90% of the membership voted to do just that, to bring the parties back together into one national conservative movement. And lo and behold, just a few years later, we were back in government by 2006.
Peter, I think it goes without question, undeniably, your best role, the role I think you cherished the most, valued the most, was as Minister of National Defense. Is that, I think that's fair to say?
I mean, it's an honor to serve any department in any capacity, but the Department of National Defense is so unique, so important, critically important. Those who serve in uniform, the civilian side as well, are so committed to our national sovereignty and protection and the projection of Canadian influence. It's the most substantive instrument of power in Canada and foreign policy. And so the people who make up that department are special. And those who deploy and serve domestically sign on with unlimited liability. They're putting their lives on the line. They go out the door in the morning, ready to do what they have to do to protect their fellow citizens and those they've sworn to protect. So I had such a privileged and unique vantage point to preside over the department. I worked with great leaders, including General Hillier and Natinchuk and Lawson and others, and I really...
Your very good friend, Condi, your friend, BFF, your Condoleezza Rice. You had an excellent relationship with her.
I had a good relationship with Condoleezza Rice. She's one of the smartest people I've ever known. I've kept up that friendship with her. Great admiration for what she's done and continues to do. She's now working at Stanford University at the Woodrow Wilson Center, and she's one of the foremost experts on many things, including Russia. So I was very, very gifted, a very gifted person, and like many others who commit themselves to global security and peace, she's a shining light.
But I mean, Peter, Canada, right? Our army, our forces. Carney's talking about a heavy investment into the military. We saw President Trump President Trump has been toying with us like a rag doll. A bit. The tariffs, one day they're in force, when they're not. You've spoken about tariffs. You've spoken about the U.S. And Canada relationship. Before we get into the election, is Canada, I remember when Lloyd was minister, the work he did on mines, people would profess that Canada was a middle power. Is Canada a soft power, a middle power? I'm asking you, what makes us relevant on the global stage? Please tell me if you could.
Well, we are relevant. There's no question, and we're a G7 country. We're a founding member of NATO. We express ourselves in ways I think that are informed and matter. Other countries do still look to Canada for our input, but we have lost something. And I do hope we're able to recapture that. I think this G7 is an opportunity to begin that again. We need to refurbish our military in ways that will allow us to be ready, to be able to do our work here in North America through NORAD, but domestically, we have to up our game. We've got to invest, and the Prime Minister is talking about doing that. I will reserve judgment. We have a short window to get some of those capabilities back. And so that is encouraging, and we'll see how it unfolds. What we have to do internationally is take firm positions, as opposed to sort of the incoherent and sort of muddled approach that we've seen for the last decade. And so again, there's a bit of a reset happening. We'll reserve judgment on what that will look like in a few months, if not a few years.
Yeah, I think Carney, Prime Minister Carney, I mean, it goes without saying, the tone is different.
Tone is different.
It
He
appears
brings a lot
encouraging.
of
Are you encouraged?
substance. I am encouraged, and he has an impressive resume. He's saying the right things about natural resources. He's saying the right things about national defense. Whether he's going to be able to move the mechanism of government and push these spending initiatives through the bureaucracy is questionable. And where's the money coming from, I guess, is the big issue. If it means more debt, accumulating more debt, as opposed to growing our economy, our productivity, that to me is, again, a big question mark. So you want to be optimistic. We need Prime Minister Carney and the government to succeed. We need them to work well with the provinces and the private sector. The right signals are coming out of the government. Time will tell. I mean, the Parliament should be sitting, and we should have a budget. Is one, I think, valid criticism of what's happened so far.
I'm mindful of the time. I know you got to go to lunch with your wife and family. Just a few more minutes.
Well,
Sir,
before we talk about my wife and family, AJ, I got to know what's going on with you. Like, it's been a long time. You've been on the Bachelor list as long as I've known you, and I've been there. I've taken that kind of heat, but I think the person most concerned is your mom. So I think you got to get it on, buddy.
You want to know the truth. You need to know the truth. I mean, doing this whole chai with Chopra was a bit of a manic decision, right? And the manic AJ makes the magic. My mother, you need to know, is a huge fan of yours.
Oh,
And I
that's
said,
very
Mom,
kind.
and we were in the car. I spent a lot of time with my mother. As you know, I moved home from Toronto in 2016 to Winnipeg. I was in Toronto 10 years as a Bay Street lobbyist, working in mining and whatsoever. Great years. And as I speak to you now, I am standing in my hotel room above the 38th floor, like looking at Toronto. And I left this city in 2016, Peter, and the look is very different, right? But
Yeah,
it's a
I
great
was there
city.
till 2020, AJ, and I know what you mean. When you go back now, it does have a different feel to it. And that's natural. There's lots of reasons for that. But and I know you're trying to avoid the question here, but really, I mean, tell your mom to call me, because I think
I'm ready to answer that. I am ready to answer. Uh, I've gone to India about 3 times. The previous try, my father had someone sort of envisioned, and he had been speaking to her. This is kind of odd. For about 3 months at 5:30 in the morning, every morning, right? And then so I had a bit of a dispute with the mayor of Winnipeg. I was a taxi lobbyist against Uber, which I was concerned about because when I lived in Toronto, I was perhaps the most prolific user of Uber. And so I took this file on in Winnipeg because I felt for the taxis, right? There were owner operators, and these guys had families. Some of these taxis they invested $500,000 in, and this was a dispute going across the country. And the mayor, with his perfect teeth, and I got into a bit of a ruckus. I was just doing my job, and but that being said, everything I've done with respect to my life, be it Indigenous, I think you recall, I'm not if you sure know, I negotiated a 19% increase for truckers in Ontario and was honored by the Sikh Association. Some of that work I've done in my past life, I'm proud of. But what comes ahead for me is making my parents proud, and focusing on business. But with respect
Well,
to
all kidding
with,
aside, I'm sure your
let me
parents are
finish.
very, very proud.
But with respect to the future Mrs. AJ Chopra, the search continues. And so I went to Thailand for a few weeks before India, and I was in my infinity pool. I decided to call her. We spoke, and then I discovered there was no English there. And then I called my dad. I go, Dad. And then my mom and dad like, she can learn. Anyway, so I don't know if it's in my DNA, brother, but hey, George Clooney did
Listen,
it later.
there's
And,
somebody out there. Lots of fish in the
and
sea.
look, and you, sir, you and your wife, right? You were justice minister, and you and your wife are kind of like Canada's version of George Clooney and Amal. She was a human rights activist, and I think I met her once in Vancouver. But you lucked out, and you were
I sure
justice.
did. I mean,
But
I
this is how
absolutely
I
won
heard it
life's
happen.
lottery.
So you were justice minister. She came to lobby you, and then you ended up lobbying her to marry you. That's quite funny.
Well, it's a little more involved with that, but yeah, I mean, Nazanin is such an incredible person and so compassionate and does so much for others, including our three kids now. And so she remains the most important person in my universe. And my parents have been very accepting and loving for her, and I just can't imagine life without her now. And it'll happen. It'll happen for you, AJ. It's like a bolt of lightning. You can
I hope
prepare.
she might be watching right now, Peter. If it happens, you'll be one of my groomsmen.
There you go.
On a
There you
parting note, brother, on a parting note, this last election,
hmm
and then we'll finish. And then I want a message to young Canadians and to Canadians from you. This last election, bro, Peter, uh, let's talk about foreign interference. We talk about Russia, we talk about whomsoever, but the most egregious, in my view, foreign interference that I think has ever occurred was by the Americans, the US, by Trump. This election previous was not, in my view, a battle between Pierre or Carney, although Carney and the Liberals played it right. And I mean, we all know, I don't recall, many months ago when Trudeau was leader, the Conservative Party of Canada was well on its way
Yeah.
to victory, with the Liberals lamenting what was inevitable, and trust, and a lot of, Trudeau was being criticized. He got wounded. The Liberal Party, there was a drama, and Carney emerged the victor, right?
Yeah.
And how did this happen? Tell me about this election. What's your take on it before we conclude? And
Well, I
what was
think
that
you've
election
summed it
all
up
about?
nicely. Like the departure of Trudeau and arrival of Trump were by far the biggest factor. I think, Trump's continuous references to Canada as the 51st state, the tariffs, the punitive impact that had, the fear factor, I would put it. And, I'll be blunt. I think the Liberal Party and then candidate for Prime Minister Mark Carney played it perfectly, brilliantly. And the advanced polls that came in late in the evening showed that in the first 10 days of the campaign, he positioned himself, the Liberal team, as being the only one who could handle Trump, who could hold back the tide of aggression. Turns out that, so far, somewhat questionable, but it worked from a political standpoint. And I don't think, and this has been, well documented, that the Conservatives pivoted to those issues around Trump and how to deal with the tariffs fast enough. But by the end of the campaign, I think they were very much back in the game and perhaps even on the rise. And Pierre Poilievre, to his credit, won more seats, higher percentage of the vote, picked up seats in areas in Ontario in particular where they weren't expected to win. The other factor, though, let's be clear, was the complete and utter collapse of the NDP, which traditionally challenges the Liberal vote in many constituencies. So all of that.
We saw that, a little bit of that in Manitoba, where the
Yeah.
provincial Liberals collapsed. Yeah.
Yeah. So all of those factors. And you know what? Here, the good news is that we can change governments in Canada without the sound of a gun. I mean, we are very blessed. We have a vibrant democracy. It's always open to scrutiny and criticism, but it's there. We have institutions that are strong. We're seeing some of these institutions challenge the courts and some of the watchdogs and the elements of oversight. But the personnel and the people will continue to change. Politics is an evolution, and the U.S. are going through a very difficult time right now. But that too will change. There's a limitation on power in every country, including the most powerful nation of the United States. We'll see midterm elections. We'll see court challenges. All of that will kick in. And this G7 will also be a chance for people to sit down face to face and maybe, just maybe, come up with some creative solutions for some of these big, big issues that we're wrestling with globally.
Wow, Peter, I mean, you're still so very articulate and astute in all of this. The title of our podcast, I don't know if you know, I think you've seen the teaser. You're on the left, I'm on the right. My hair's coiffed. Is politics?
Wait a minute. I'm on the left and you're on the right. Like, I know you're now much more conservative than when I first met you, but
In fact, I am. In fact, the provincial premier, I became, I just so you know, and I don't think it's any secret to anyone, and I wasn't exactly subtle about it. I've been home since 16. I'm working in the family businesses, and I think you can speak to this with the Prime Minister Churchill behind you. And as we conclude, please speak to his adage, his principles, and then I just want you to talk about hockey. I became a conservative because I wanted. I mean, I who was it telling? A local MLA, Andrew Smith, a good friend of mine, was saying it'll happen to you eventually, right? And as I came home in 16, and then when I was working in Toronto, I was working for a guy named Don Bubar. He was the CEO of Avalon Rare Metals, and he brought the PDAC and Assembly of First Nations together with a memo of understanding. And you may have met him. He was a strong PC, and he was a riding president. Sadly, he passed away a year or two ago, and he was a great mentor to me. And he was a big Harper guy. And he always said to me, he goes, "You will come around someday." And oddly enough, I became, well, I could say I became a provincial conservative, a Heather Stephenson conservative. She launched her provincial campaign, and there was the PC premier of Manitoba did barbecue at our property, and it was deeply touching, and to my father especially, to host her, and it was a successful event, and I believe, I mean, while there was a lot of anger in that, there was a wrong decision with respect to policy and an egregious insult to Indigenous. And when I became a conservative, I lost a few friends in the Indigenous community, which, I've had for years. But I mean, I had nothing to do with that, right? And all I did was host a barbecue. And
well,
I've known
politics
Wob.
is
I've known
never
Wob.
changing.
No, and I've known Wob for many years. I knew him when he was running for national chief, and we were friends. It's just, But I have to say this about Wob Canoe. In these fires, he called the state of emergency, and Chief Monius was speaking to this. In my view, I mean, currently he's one of the most popular premiers in the country, and I respect him. And I'm happy for the Indigenous people of Manitoba. It's not just Manitoba, across the country, because there's been no. I mean, I think Elijah Harper. There's many political examples, many political MP, but Wob Canoe, I will say, concede. And Wob Canoe, I'm sorry if you're listening, watching. I think you've done an outstanding job, Premier, and especially on these wildfires. And leaders rise to the occasion, and he has. And you don't have to be. I don't think the party you belong to defines the leader you are, right? And yeah.
No, I think that's true.
I'm
That's
actually going
that's
to.
a very astute. That's a very astute comment. And
I-
Churchill famously changed parties, mid-career, and changed
So did
back,
I.
ironically. So that is the essence of being a good leader is putting people first. And I think that our country really shines when we're able to do that. I would also quickly add, I got to work with a lot of great people from Manitoba, premiers and federal members like Shelley Glover and Joy Smith and many others.
Great lady.
One of my best friends in the world, Dave Scholler, is from Winnipeg and is a lawyer there. I think the very best of our country is when we're able to come around and come together on national issues. We talk about nation building issues right now, and this is a critical hinge moment for Canada. You know, we have to get ourselves in line, put aside separatist entities, and really talk about making this country live up to its potential. And we have unlimited potential, unlimited resources, blessed with great people, with great history. We're really the envy of the world, but we're not living up to the potential that we have just yet.
I want you to know that I'm taking my CU. I'm working for a global leader in cancer technology. In fact, when we're talking about nation building, I'm working on this energy project on the West Coast. I'm headed to Vancouver, and as soon as Carney started talking about energy and nation building, up until then I was dumbfounded in how I was going to move this file. But now it's like, okay, we got to port, you know. But lastly, I just want to say this: I'm going to Ford Nations party tonight, and Captain Canada, you know, in my view, he's been outstanding. And, you know, if he had French, he'd be prime minister, you know, I think. I think he's been outstanding. And Daniel Smith was outstanding too. I mean, a lot of people showed leadership in different ways. I thought you're a premier from out east.
Tim Houston.
And the lady?
We have some good people.
And the female premier?
Yes, Premier Holt in New Brunswick. Yeah.
She's excellent.
Susan
and so,
Holt. And I mean, we've got some great people who are locked in right now. And
what do you think of Ford Nation? And then we'll conclude. Like, how did the Ford? Like, what is the phenomenon Ford Nation all about? Right? Like, I mean,
well, you know, it's never one thing. It's a lot of things. And Premier Ford, I think, has really stepped up in the absence of federal leadership at the outset with Donald Trump's return, and you know, pushing back in a forceful but thoughtful way. So I think that garnered him a lot of goodwill. He's won 3 consecutive majority governments. Hasn't been done since the 1950s. And so that denotes and demonstrates that we do have some very good people committed to public life, and, you know, putting their maybe their own other ambitions aside and saying what's good for Canada, what's good for our provinces. So that is a high note. We need more of that. We need more pride and purpose, getting more people to work, ensuring that we have very honest, hardworking people in these positions is what is going to propel us forward as a country. And Ajay, listen, it's great to talk to you. It's good to hear some of the things that you're doing. And
can you tell me,
be in touch again.
The famous Winston Churchill quote? Can you? And then I need you to talk about the Winnipeg Jets. I know you watched that game. I know you watched that game.
There's many famous Winston Churchill sayings, but of course, you know, democracy is the worst form of government, except compared to all the others. He also said, in the current context of so much conflict in the world, it's better to jaw than war. As for hockey, I mean,
you watched. Were you watching that game where we scored the third period, 1.6 seconds? I couldn't sleep that night.
You know what? I just happened to be in a hotel room watching that game, and I was almost going to turn it off because I was disappointed to see Winnipeg lose. But then they came back in such stunning fashion, and of course, Hellebuck's got to be the best goalie in the world. We saw him, you know, in that Four Nations Challenge, and he stood on his head in so many games this year. So I was disappointed to see Winnipeg not make it to the final. And still hopeful, somewhat hopeful for the last Canadian team standing. But, you know, sports, hockey, it's always been important to me. My kids play. I got a sweater here behind me signed by Paul Henderson, the greatest goal ever scored. And it's, you know, a lot of life lessons I have found in hockey rinks and ball fields, and you meet the finest kind of people. So sports is important. Teaches you a lot of really good things about how to be graceful.
Peter, in COVID, somehow I got inspired to build a hockey rink. And it wasn't just an ordinary hockey rink. I had to build it Olympic size, of course. The shoveling, I'm surprised my toes didn't fall off. But I say this, that winter, Peter, was the best winter of my life. And I could go out anytime, look at the scars. I was so proud that I did that. I built a hockey rink and nobody believed I could do that. Yeah.
Good for
Anyhow,
you.
Peter, from the bottom of my heart, sir, thank you. This has been wonderful, and this has been an excellent discussion. You were my first guest right after Chief Monius, and it's been an honor to have you, sir.
Thank you.
Last question. You still feel it burning in your gut?
Well, I still feel public service. I'm involved in a number of boards. I was on the Special Olympics board, Big Brothers Big Sisters. I do work with Wounded Warriors, which is a very important network of organizations and people across the country to help members of the Canadian Armed Forces, veterans, and their families suffering from service-related injuries, and all emergency responders. So those are things that I currently feel very passionately about. As for politics, you know what? Politics is always going to be there.
Absolutely, yeah.
My focus is my family, my current occupation,
as it should be.
It's politics is always there. It's important that we get people fully engaged in politics and making decisions that are in the best interest of everyone.
Peter Mackay, with Ajay, Chai, and Chopra, sir, I'm deeply honored. Thank you so much, friend. Stay blessed, and my best wishes to your family, and God bless. Take care.
Take care, Ajay. We'll talk again soon.
All the
Cheers.
best. Bye.